All right, let's get nerdy. What's up, everybody? My name is Andy Baeza, and I am a photographer, videographer, and audio engineer here based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If this is your first time watching, I appreciate you taking the time out, and let's dive in. So initially, this video was gonna talk about S-Log and how to use it and when to use it and everything else, and I'm gonna get to that. But I also wanted to kind of compare it to some of the other common picture profiles that I see used a lot in Sony cameras, particularly the A7III and the A7R III. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a look at the standard picture profile, which is just the flat movie profile straight out of camera when you turn on movie and hit record. I'm taking the native ISO of each of these profiles and comparing it to the S-Log native ISO, which is 800. So I've got some side-by-side tests here. We're gonna look at the standard picture profile, and then we're gonna get into some of the other ones. So first, let's look at the standard. So we're gonna look at different exposure levels and noise levels, and we'll look at the waveform to see what's going on with that noise in the image. For all of the main tests, I recorded everything at f2.8 in the native ISO for that picture profile, as well as ISO 800. To compensate between the two, I chose the shutter speed because there's no motion in this, it's strictly just a color chart, and it'll give us a pretty accurate representation without changing the depth of field too much. I'm shooting everything at 24 frames a second. So the standard picture profile was shot at 1/50th of a second, f2.8, ISO 100, because that's the native ISO for the camera. Switching to ISO 800, I had to bump the shutter speed up to 1/400th of a second in order to get it to match. You can see the noise level go up a little bit, but because the standard picture profile is so crushed and so sharpened, you don't really see as much of it as you will in some of these other profiles. Now let's take a look at Cine 4. I'm not really gonna talk about the overall dynamic range of each individual profile in this video. Gerald Undun's already done a fantastic video about that, and I'll link to that below. You don't get quite as much dynamic range out of Cine 4 as you do S-Log 2 or S-Log 3. So with Cine 4, the native ISO is 200, and then it transitions to ISO 800 at 1/400th of a second. And you'll see that there's a lot more noise, but it's fairly controlled and you can balance it pretty well. S-Log is a little bit different. S-Log has a really wide dynamic range of 14 stops. The best time to shoot S-Log is when you're doing anything that has a lot of dynamic range between your highlights and your shadows, with a whole lot of information in between. S-Log 2 is a very light, hungry profile. You need a lot of light in order to get all of that dynamic range, and you need a lot of light to be able to use it without getting too much noise. But looking at it, you'll see why it's a good idea to overexpose anytime you're shooting anything with S-Log 2. That being said, you wanna try to stick to the native ISO as much as possible. S-Log 2 is designed for 8-bit color, which fits in perfectly with the Alpha Mirrorless series, especially since they only output 8-bit color, whether you're filming internally or over HDMI. So you're gonna see a side-by-side of S-Log 2 that is metered at a correct exposure in the camera, and then one that is metered as overexposed in the camera. You'll see that the image looks really dark, and then when we apply the grade, it is so noisy, especially in the shadows, and you can really see it on the waveform. With the image that's overexposed, when we apply a similar grade, bringing down the IRE levels of the color checker to match, you'll notice a lot less noise with a lot of range. Now let's look at the grades side by side, and you'll really see the noise sticking out on the left-hand side. We'll look at the same pattern with S-Log 3. Filmed at exposure, next to one that's filmed 2 stops over. When we grade the image that the camera thinks is properly exposed, you'll see, again, it is super noisy. When we look at the overexposed image, you'll see it's got a lot more detail, a lot more clarity, and better color rendition. Now, as far as color goes, a lot of people prefer S-Log 3 to S-Log 2 because it's easier to grade. It has a slightly smaller gamut of colors and it doesn't see as many colors as S-Log 2. That being said, it is designed for a 10-bit color system. So when you start applying a heavy grade to S-Log 3, you're gonna start to see a little bit more banding quicker than you do in an S-Log 2. Now let's look at HLG. HLG is designed to be in BT 2020 color space. You'll see that its native ISO is at 125, and this one is filmed at 1/60th of a second. When we bump it up to ISO 800 and 1/400th of a second, you'll see that it's noisy, but not nearly as noisy as what the camera thought was a properly exposed S-Log image. And for this last one, I filmed it at S-Log 2 f3.5 with 180-degree shutter at 1/50th of a second. to get it to match. I applied a corrective color grade, and then I applied my favorite teal and orange LUT that I just happen to like as a good creative look. S-Log 2 can be a really useful tool when you use it in the right environment. If you're indoors and you don't have a lot of bright light, I advise you stay away from it. If you're outdoors, use it to your heart's content, but be sure to use an ND filter so you can stay at 180-degree shutter angle. And with that, that's all I got for today. So over the next few videos, I'm gonna talk about the exposure triangle in photography and how it applies in photography and video. So be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more content coming your way. And with that, I'm out. Peace. But I figured maybe I'd... Why is this always so bad? Ugh.